Good evening. I call to order the special called Board of Commissioners meeting, January 9, 2014. Item number 2 on the new business is discuss and/or take action on corrective actions needed for Williamsport Estate subdivision. I'd like the record to show that I will recuse myself, turn the meeting over to Vice Mayor Johnson. I do have personal interest in the property.
Thank you, Mayor. Item A was discuss and or take corrective action on the subdivision at question. And the second item will be discuss and or take action on the level of the mayor's involvement in errors and omissions in the Williamsport Estate subdivision approval and building process. This time, I'd like to turn the meeting over to Commissioner Basile.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. At the conclusion of the last special meeting, we pretty much determined through the official records and testimony of former Codes Director Donald Lavorne that the Williamsport subdivision was recorded, constructed, and then sold to third parties without the payment of any fees to the city, securing of the appropriate approvals from the Planning Commission, being reviewed by the city engineer for deficiencies, and being inspected for adherence to regulations. The Board of Commissioners feels that it's important to the Fairview citizens that ultimately purchase these homes that they not be harmed by any actions of the developer, of our own codes department, or by the Board of Commissioners in trying to fix this problem. So to that end, I'm going to offer a motion which is to basically open the floor up, because we need it for Robert's Rules of Order, to have discussion. I'm not married to these 5 things, but it will give us some place to start as a way that we can move toward fixing the problems or taking whatever corrective actions we determine are necessary. So, I make a motion that the Codes Department shall immediately issue to the developer the appropriate citations for failure to comply with the subdivision regulations. That would be under, and Ms. Johnson, I have a copy of this for you. That would be under 113-201, recording of unapproved plats. It would be under 113-202, use of unapproved plats, and C 1-113-203, construction of illegal buildings. So, and I'm not, the Codes Department and along with the city attorney would have to figure out what the proper citations would be.
Are there any other copies of what you?
I have one other copy here that we could make. I have one for the city recorder, and then pass those down.
You need that.
I'd like to share this. We can share it.
Okay. Well, we can check.
That appropriate fees and permit amounts be assessed, and obviously then the developer would need to pay those fees. They could be plat fees, grading fees, demolition fees, bonds, whatever would be appropriate in that particular subdivision. That an as-built plat will be prepared by our city engineer, with the cost being paid by the developer. Once that as-built plat is finished, then the city engineer and the Planning Commission will review it against the current city codes for the subdivision, and will make a recommendation to this board within 60 days as to what is the necessary actions to bring the subdivision into compliance. And the board, of course, will then act on it. And that no certificate of occupancy will be issued on the final house that's not occupied until the whole process is finished and whatever improvements or changes that are required are made. So that's my submission to get us started.
We have that as a proper motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We'll open the floor up for discussion. Mr. Toddy, are you prepared to speak on behalf of the development and what the current motion is on the floor?
Yes. I don't really agree with that, and I'm going to tell you why. Well, when I had my plat drawn, I asked Don LeBorn, the codes director then, what I could do with the property. He told me, and I had it drawn accordingly. Now, what he told me was there could be the houses built on the easement and on a gravel easement 20 feet wide. So I had that drawn accordingly, got it to him and told him, let me know where we're going next. A week or two, maybe 3 went by, and I didn't hear anything until he notified me that it had been signed by the Planning Commission and it was ready to be recorded. Thus, I gave him a check for the recording and it got recorded. From then on, we started pulling building permits to build the houses. I've probably called for inspection 20 times. Guys coming out there, checking and passing what we're doing. Nobody ever said the first word to me that anything was wrong. 2 years go by, we're over there working. Some of you folks driving up and down the road, seeing the work going on over there. Nobody ever says a word. Now, what am I, as a developer or builder, supposed to go on when I present a plat and it gets signed and back to me and recorded, with me having the right at that point to go to work? What am I supposed to think? So we went to work, and we, like I said, worked there for 2 years, and we're about done. And all of a sudden, boom, there it is. I have a lot of questions about that myself. I got my own opinions as why it's here and now. But as far as, I don't know what your recommendations are to be done to the 4 lots over there, which is private property with a easement serving the homes. And, but I really don't see how it's right for it to be forced on me in the end to change the development when nothing has been said through the entire process of this until now.
Any other statement?
Not at this point.
Okay, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Toddy at this time?
I've just got a couple. You've been building houses for how long?
Several years.
How many times have you ever built houses in a subdivision that you only had to come before the board on the approval of changing the zoning? Have you ever had to come back to planning for anything else?
In the past, everything we done was 30 and 40 lot stuff, and it was a procedure to that. That was actually back in about 2000, 2001, and up until this time. I didn't know what might have changed. This being a 4 lot development on an easement, which I was told that was doable, I didn't really see the big problem.
You didn't think you need to come back before the planning commission again after the rezoning was completed for anything?
Well, I wasn't sure. That's why I told Don LeBorn, I said, here's my plat of what we drawn according to what I was told I could. And I said, let me know where we go from here. So if that means it was fixing to go to the planning commission, then okay.
But we didn't go in front of the planning commission.
But it did not go to the meeting, right?
And since that time, the houses were completed and sold, correct?
Yes,
Without going in front of the commission.
right.
I don't have anything else on that.
Only thing I have to ask is, what about the fees? What you normally have to pay for the process, did you recall, did you pay all your fees, go through the process that you normally would have done in this subdivision?
We had demolition permits that we got. The fees for the planning commission meeting, to the best of my understanding from past stuff, the fee was to be paid before it went to the meeting, but that never was brought to my attention. They never asked me to bring the check. They never told me when I was to be on the agenda. I just was like hanging until I get the plat back signed by the planning commission, good to go.
Is it normal process for you to wait until they ask for fees when you've done other subdivision, or do you normally bring in the fees that are expected at the time?
Well, I think they would have normally called me and told me how much they were. And at that point, I would have known it's time to go pay them, but I never heard anything.
Mr. Toddy, you spoke of, you purchased a demolition permit. The city nor the codes department can find any record. Can you provide a record from your company for that?
Maybe. That's been back a couple of years, so maybe, but I'm almost certain that I got a permit to tear the old house down.
We were told at the previous meeting by our former codes director that you did in fact get that permit. Nowhere in the codes department can it be found, but a $125 grading permit, they can find that. They cannot find even the $200 fee where you brought the property in to have it rezoned by the planning commission and by the board of commissioners. Do you think you can find a record of that?
Well, I could look back and see, but I don't know why I wouldn't have. If they asked me for it, I would have paid it.
You brought up the plat and you say it was signed by the planning commission, but yet it did not go in front of the planning commission. Could you tell me who signed it?
I think it was Matt Beata.
Matt Beata, and for the record, he would be the second secretary of the planning commission at that time. Do you know who else would have signed the plat?
No, well,
Would you have signed it yourself, or would you?
Would I have signed his name?
No, would you have signed the plat with your name?
I did sign that
Okay,
plat.
you signed the plat, Mr. Beata signed the plat. Who else would have signed the plat?
Well, I think the zoning, maybe that's Don's signatures on that, Randy Chapdelain's signatures on that. The people from 911 for the street addresses signatures on it. And I guess that's about it. And it's a stamped word, and yours, and where it's recorded,
You say yours, who you're indicating?
Beverly.
Okay.
You say that, that 911 signed off on it, and it is part of the county 911 system. It is on the grid. It is listed as a city street. You have stated that you think it is a private drive. The county has it recorded at the Register of Deeds office as a city street.
Well, I'm unaware of that.
But they're saying that's based on the plat that was taken to Sadie Wade's office.
Yeah.
And they're saying, they said today that it actually should have a green sign instead of a blue sign, and it should be a city street.
Yeah, well, there again,
Okay.
I'm unaware of that.
Yes,
I
sir.
wasn't-
Are there any other questions at this time? Yes, sir.
I apologize, Mr. Toddy, you saw me fast paced. So, just to put it in the simplest form, here's my problem. I apologize for this, but I think most everybody in here knows I worked for the IRS for 30 years. And if you had called me as a senior manager with the IRS and said, do I have to file a tax return? I've been filing tax return for 40 years, and so here he is, it's another year, do I have to file a tax return? And I said, no, you don't have to file a tax return. Then granted, I can understand the frustration with that, but there's a level of common sense that says, for 40 years, I filed this tax return, and then suddenly, I don't have to do it. And to my way of thinking, a light bulb goes off, and I at least double check that answer before I don't file my return. You seem to me to be a very good businessman, to be in control of what you're doing and know how to do that sort of thing, and I just can't get past that. That as a businessman that had been doing business this way for so many years, that even though Mr. Lavorne may have told you that, then I can't get past that the light bulb wouldn't have gone off, and you had a responsibility to make sure that was the right answer. So I think, from where I sit, you have a responsibility to make it right, for lack of a better terms. That would mean that there is a penalty for recording those plats or doing that. It's a small penalty, I believe, but it is a penalty. There are fees that didn't get paid, they need to be paid. I don't know what improvements are required. I was not trying to say that. That'll be left up to better minds than I have. The city engineer and the planning commission will determine and make recommendations about what needs to be done. There may be nothing that needs to be done. So I just don't know at this point. But I can't get behind the idea that somebody that's done this as their primary function most all of their adult life, that it wouldn't dawn on them that there was something out of whack here. And I think as responsible developer, as a responsible person, I think we have a responsibility in something that we've done before to verify the information that we're given. And that's why I believe that you are liable for this. Not more than anybody else would be. I just want you to set it right. If that turns out from the planning commission that they feel that variances are in order and you don't need to do anything to those houses out there, great. Then you pay the fees, you get the proper plat recorded, you move on. But I still believe, and I've put a lot of time and effort into thinking about this, I still believe that even though the codes director, and he admits to telling you, even though it was his mistake, you as a responsible long-term developer should have had something should have told you to at least check on it. And that's where I come down on it. The rest of the board can see.
Are there any more comments from the board at this time?
Mr. Vice Mayor, may I say something?
Are there any other comments here? Yes, sir.
I've got a concern about the holding up on the occupancy permit for the house that's finished. I don't know if there's a contract signed on the house or not. If there is, the people that's going to be punished are going to be some of the people that we just said you did not want to punish, and that would be the people who are going to buy the house. The second concern I have is that I think everybody here knows that the city has some problem with this. I don't know what all the problems are. I don't know who all the responsible parties are, but I think the city certainly intentionally or unintentionally has some culpability in this. The problem that I have is that if he has a signed contract for this house, the city could be getting itself into an unconstitutional interference with the right to contract. And if that is the case, you don't want to go there. I would suggest that in relation to that house, that if it is finished and if it is ready for an inspection and if he actually has a buyer, that you be allowed to proceed with that because it would be no harder to correct than the other three.
Do you have a contract on that house with a closing date?
Well, it's done and it's ready to hand over to the owner. It's a family member, so
I mean, have they
Is
paid
it-
you? Do you already have the money from them? Is there?
Is there a written contract at this time that you could provide this board?
no, not at this time.
Without a written contract, I think that the potential liability, until we are assured that everything is in proper order, there's potential liability there. We now have knowledge that this subdivision was built unapproved. Allow continuation puts us at liability too. So I would, since there's no written contract, I would suggest that that's not germane to the situation. at this time.
Would you consider, if he gets a written contract, going ahead and considering the house then?
He can certainly bring it back
Right.
to us for
Because
consideration at any time. but
that would put you in position of, like I said, punishing people that are not parties to this at all.
I'm not prepared to commit one way or the other as to what I would vote to do at that particular time, but as of tonight, there is no written contract, there is no one standing. So as far as I'm concerned, it's really not part of the decision to be made.
All I was asking was that you would consider, I mean, he could present that. I wouldn't ask you to
Well,
make
yeah,
a.
he could go out and get a written contract
Right.
that was made after this meeting.
Right, but you
And then
would,
we could consider accepting that, but he
Right.
can't go present a written contract backdated.
no, I'm not asking you to do contract litigation, legislation either. I'm just saying if he has that, he could present that to the board.
Right, and we could then make a decision as to whether or not we wanted to go ahead and allow the closing at that time. My decision on that would be predicated on how quickly everything is moving along. If it looks like we're heading to a reasonable conclusion in a very short period of time, I probably would vote, fine, close it and let the folks have it. But if we're dragging our feet, we're not getting fees paid, we're not getting the fines paid, we're dragging our feet on it, then I don't see any need for the city to be in a hurry. That's my opinion, that's how I see it.
That's all I have. I just wanted to bring that up and be sure that, like I said, I'm not asking for any future considerations or contract legislation and this, just want to make sure that we're clear.
Well, just for clarification from you, at this time, there is no contract, so there wouldn't be any liability upon the city, am I correct, as far as hardship?
Well, I don't know what your-
Or is
I
it gonna
don't-
be
I don't-
open for months to go?
I don't know what your
years?
damages would be, but once I produce a contract, then you know what your damages
But
are.
there is no contract.
That's what I'm hearing.
Okay, so we don't have the liability at this point.
Well, you don't have this greater liability as you would if there was a contract.
Okay. I just don't want us to be able to set a prerequisite for other builders and things to go finish projects that were not approved and then say, well, I finished them, so I don't want to have a hardship on who I'm selling them to, while possibly in full knowledge and knowing that they, before the sale, that they were not done properly and according to the rules and regulations of planning commission.
Normally, I would hope the city wouldn't be in this position,
I would hope so too.
and then we wouldn't have to bring that up.
I think I would feel a little more comfortable with knowing what was actually the recommendations of the engineer before we determined the house, because it's more about the subdivision versus letting them go ahead and finish the process of the house. So before we move forward, I think I would like to know what all the engineer has found, if there's anything with the houses that we need to know, and then that would help me make my decision better.
Mr. Griggs, with that being said, you were sort of put on the spot at the last meeting you were here, and you didn't have much time to go over the plat and visit the site as well, but you did come up with some figures, and you shared those with us. Since then, have any of those figures changed? Have they gone up? Have they gone down? Do you have a different opinion? Is there anything you need to add at this point?
No. Since that time, we have not reviewed the plat. So the numbers we put together previously are still as good as we've got
Okay.
at this time.
All right, that being said, for you really to do anything further, to really truly evaluate it, you would have to be part of Commissioner Basale's motion for you to actually do the as-built drawings and see how it compares to what has been recorded. Would that be correct?
That's correct.
So at this time, at the last meeting, so I guess this needs to be part of the record, there was $106,000+ in, I wouldn't say fees, but
That was worst-case scenario
Wor-
of improvements.
Let me correct you slightly.
Yes, sir.
The estimate we had was $85,450 for the improvements. We were asked at that time to estimate what the bond would have been.
okay.
And the bond is the estimate plus 25%. And when you do that, you come out with $106,812. So there's a slight difference between bond and
So
estimated
the
costs.
106,000 covers everything that you
That'd
found
be-
at that point?
That would-
Bond even plus 25%?
Correct.
Mr. Griggs, how long would it take for that process to happen, for y'all to go out and do an as-built drawing and then compare it to the plat and then identify those areas where it didn't meet regulations?
As-built drawing needs to be put together by a registered surveyor. That's a typical process for a plat. We do not have a registered surveyor in our house, so we would subcontract that. So we would have to find a registered surveyor who could do it and fit into his schedule. And I don't know what that would be right now.
Excuse me. What would be the problem with Randy Chapdelaine doing it? He's the one who drawed the plat.
It would be left up to
He's
the board.
familiar
I don't-
with it. He
I don't
could
have
go
any
out there
problem with
probably in a
anything.
timely manner and draw it for you.
If that would speed the process up, I don't have any problem with that.
Larry, would you have a problem with someone that did the work previous to come back and do the work the second time, or would we
No,
need an
this is-
outside?
He'd just be coming back and doing an as-built on when he did the one before, it was just a plat. As long as he's a registered surveyor, I don't have a problem with it.
So once I assume what you're offering there, Mr. Ty, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but you would then contract with Mr. Chapdelaine to have that done?
Yes.
And once you provided us with that, Mr. Griggs, about how long would it take for you folks to do your work
We could do our work within a week.
within a week?
We would, we'd want to do the measurement and calculations, paper measurement and paper calculations. And then we would want to go on site and see it ourselves.
Okay,
So it'd be about a week.
all right.
Well, depending on the surveyor's timetable, it looks like it could happen within the 60 days easily.
Well, easily, yeah. If time is of the essence, then that keeps everybody motivated to keep moving it. I know that Griggs and Mahoney have been real responsive to us, so I'm sure Mr. Chapdelaine would work as fast as he could, so.
And who's responsible? You're going to pay for this? Who's fitting the bill?
To Mr. Chapdelaine?
Yeah.
I will be.
Okay.
We consider ourselves a city employee.
Right.
It'd be a conflict of interest for us to work for Mr. Toddy in this case. So we would be working for the city.
But when Mr. Toddy submits that plat, he has a fee that has to be paid with that plat
As a city,
to the city.
right?
And that would go toward paying the engineers. And correct me if I'm wrong, and I didn't see, John's not here tonight, I guess, but my understanding was that in most instances, after y'all review the plat, there is some fee that's passed back to the developer, am I misunderstanding that?
We're not involved in that. I
He-
can't answer that.
Yeah, Mr. Griggs wouldn't be involved in that at all, but that can be answered by the codes department, but there is, Mr. Hall,
Some fees are passed on to the developer.
correct.
For reviewing the plats and drawings.
We can,
So
we can,
whatever the standard procedure would be, would need to be followed in this. And if that meant there was part of Mr. Griggs' fee that got passed back, then that needs to be passed back.
I've got a question for you, Mr. Griggs, while we've got your attention here, and this will go back to the plat and when it was submitted to 911. One of the problems that we had on it was it being a street, and you considered it to be a private drive. Did 911 say anything to you about that when you went up and filed it? They just ignored that it was qualified as a
Nothing was
street?
said to me about it.
And that was part of the major cost of correction going to be, am I right or wrong?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
The cost, the major part of the cost that you arrived at is completing the street as should have been completed.
Our cost estimate included, as best we could tell, complying with all subdivision regulations. As we read the subdivision regulations, that should have been a paved street.
Okay.
So our cost estimate included paving a road that long and that wide. But I think I pointed out to you last time, and I'll do it again tonight, the Planning Commission has the right to waive any of the subdivision regulations
Through variances.
through variances. So we assume no variances. So I emphasized last time, and I emphasize again, we feel like our cost estimate is on the high side if there are no variances. It could well be acceptable to Planning Commission for all, we just don't know. I can't predict that.
That's what I'm trying to, maybe I'm not wording it correctly.
No,
That's what I'm
that goes
trying
exactly as
to
to what
make
your
happen.
motion was.
That item one, the issuing of the citations, appropriate citations and those fines that are related to those citations, that's the punitive part of this. Once that's been done, then the rest of it is about, almost like it didn't exist, how would you bring it in and follow the process? So you have to have an as-built plat because now there's structures on it. And then you compare that, the city engineer reviews it, gives the discrepancies. The planning commission looks at the discrepancies and says, grant a variance here, don't grant a variance there, grant a variance here, don't grant a variance there. And then it comes back and we either say yay or nay. And then if there's corrective actions, then the developer does the corrective actions. If there's not corrective actions, then it stays as it is. And the variances are granted by the planning commission or by the board. Right? The only punitive part of this is the fines, the tickets up front. The rest of it, I'm just trying to put it back in and have it go through the process just as if it was brand new starting today.
And if you're talking about the fees to the planning commission, I don't have a problem paying the planning commission fees, the review fee, but to fine me for me being misled, does that sound right? I mean, that sounds right to y'all? That's okay?
Well, Mr. Toddy, let me ask you this. This may sound a little far-fetched, but it's as simple as I could put it. If you were riding down Highway 100, and let's say you were driving, and I was riding with you, and I told you the speed limit was 55 miles an hour, but a cop stopped us and it was 40, do you think they're going to give you a ticket? Or you think they're going to say, well, my buddy here said it was 55 miles an hour, so I shouldn't get a ticket?
Well, that's not a comparable to me. You're talking about fining me for something that I don't feel like I'm guilty of, period. That's what I don't have a problem with the fees, but the fine, I do. I just don't think that's right.
So
Whether it's $5 or $50 or $500, right's right and wrong's wrong, and that just ain't right.
So ignorance to the law means you should just walk away and the taxpayer
Well,
should have
this
to pay
ain't
for
the
it.
law. Nobody called me and told me that I owed X amount of dollars for the planning commission fee. Nobody never said anything to me.
You're not being fined for the fees. The citations won't have anything to do with not paying the fees. The citations will be for recording an unimproved plat, building
on an unimproved plat and constructing buildings that were not approved. Those are the citations, and Tennessee code says those are crimes, says they are misdemeanors.
So.
And as I was trying to explain earlier, I understand you followed the advice of the codes director. It was in error. But ignorance is not a defense against the law. It is the law. And as a responsible builder who's been in this business for quite some time, to me, I have a hard time getting my hands around that it wouldn't have dawned on you, this is not right. I need to follow up and make sure this is not right. And that's what I think the fine is for. I don't think the fine is for not paying the fees.
So I'm getting fined for not telling Mr. LeBourne his job.
You're getting fined because you did not, and it has to pass first, but you're getting fined because you recorded an unapproved plat.
I didn't, Mr. LeBourne recorded the plat. I didn't go over there.
Yes, sir. Well, Mr.
So I'm
Toddy, I've
getting,
tried to
now I'm
explain to
getting a
you.
fine for his actions now.
I believe you are deserving of the citation for the reason that I stated. I'm
Does that
sorry
mean
if you
anybody
disagree.
that bypassed a planning commission meeting on anything that was supposed to have went there would be in the same shoes?
Yes, sir. If they failed to follow one of the statutes, one of the regulations.
So
they
if
would be
they was
subject to
told,
fine.
if they was told they needed to go to the planning commission to have something reviewed, and they chose not to do it, that's kind of the same thing we're talking about right now, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I would have to know more circumstances around. You're not being fined for not going to the planning commission. You're being fined for recording those plats and building on those plats. You're not being fined for not going to the planning commission. That's a procedure that you didn't follow that the city expects you to follow. But the citation is not for that.
So it's because I didn't follow up behind Mr. LeBourne to make sure that the city of Fairview's employee was doing their job correctly. That's why I'm getting fined?
No, sir. You're getting fined because you didn't follow the rules.
I was following what I was told. What is,
And in my opinion, and how I will vote, is that I believe you had sufficient knowledge as a long-term contractor to know better, that you should have known that regardless of what Mr. LeVorn told you, your past experience was you did go to the planning commission. And so you at least should have contacted him twice and said, wait a minute, Don, this is a problem. Why am I not going this time? But you didn't do that. You liked the answer you got, and so you went on and you built. And I'm sorry, but from where I sit, you have a responsibility as a developer before you take action to verify the information that you get, whether it comes from a city official, whether it comes from an engineer, whether it comes from a subcontractor. If I'm doing roofing for you and I come out and quote you this amount of money to do roofing, and you look at the house, you just built another one last year, same size, and I'm gonna charge you twice as much as you paid before, are you just gonna say, okay, or are you gonna question me on that? Because it doesn't meet your past experience.
it's hard to say. Every situation is different. I can't say what I would have said then or
Well,
not. I mean, that's really
we
neither here
can-
nor there. What you're doing is talking about assessing a fine to me over something that I did not do.
Commissioner Briscoe, may I ask a question?
Oh, we
Just-
could go round and round all night long. I've said it every way I know how to
Past
say
that
it.
point right there, earlier, when we first started this, I got the impression that you hold no fault in this as far as correcting these matters. Is that right?
As far as the fees that's due to Fairview, for a planning commission review, I don't have a problem with paying those fees.
I'm talking about correcting what should have been done as far as
Which-
building that subdivision that you and your company profited from.
It was presented to me that I could do exactly what I'd done. And I was led to believe that over a process of 2 years as the projects and the process went on. Nobody has ever told me anything to the contrary.
How many subdivisions have you built here?
I don't know,
10?
2, no, 4 or 5 maybe, something, I don't know.
5? Did you ever have to go back in front of the planning commission?
We appeared before the planning commission, depending on how many times they required us to till it got settled. But it was big subdivisions.
Well, there's basic requirements on every one of them that we have, and I believe this subdivision is classified as a large subdivision, am I right?
Major
Well,
subdivision.
A major subdivision.
I don't know. And
Well, it is with 4 buildings
Okay,
on it.
well, that's just not what
And
I was told.
and my question is, I'll repeat it again, do you have any intentions of correcting these problems? It should have been adhered to at the time the subdivision was built.
I don't know what problems you're talking about, so I can't answer that yes or no.
Our engineer here has already described the streets are not built to standards, what they should be done. It's approximately $80-something thousand worth of work. Am I right? Just in that phase.
Yes, sir. The
Whether it
streets,
be
yeah.
20,000, 50, or 80, my question is, do you agree that it should have been done differently and you should be responsible for it?
I agree that I'd done exactly what I was told I could do on a private drive, and that's what that is out there.
The 911 people don't say it is. They say it's a street.
Well, I didn't talk to them. It was recorded by Mr. LeBourne. When it went over there, I've never heard otherwise.
And you built 5 or 6.
It's on my plat as an easement. They signed the plat. It plainly shows an easement across a piece of property. Why would they put a city street on it when it plainly shows an easement on the plat?
Well, Mr. Todd, they didn't put a city street on it, you did. When you submitted it in a major subdivision, it was classified as a city street. And my question is, as many subdivisions and homes as individual homes that you've built, you know the process. I don't have any doubt about your intelligence whatsoever. It's knowing the right process to go through. And I believe you knew it and you didn't follow it.
Well, I disagree with that.
That's your opinion. So, but that's mine, and,
That's- yeah.
I'd like to see it all corrected, is my goal. But apparently you've stated you're not gonna do that.
Mr. Johnson, I wonder if I might speak.
Yes, sir.
My name's Russell McCann. I'm a real estate attorney. Excuse me, I've done a lot of work with a lot of different builders. Done a little bit of work with the Toddies, and wanted to come to this meeting because,
Sir, could you tell us, you did tell us your name, could you tell us who you are representing?
well, I wouldn't say that I represent anybody in particular. I work with the Toddies, and I'm here basically to speak on their behalf.
And it would not be proper for him to speak.
Okay, we're gonna,
Well, I think that y'all are misinformed about a couple of the
sir,
rules of your own city. I mean, this is
let-
not.
sir, let me ask you one more question. Are you here representing anyone tonight? Do you represent the mayor or her husband or both? If you do represent either one of them or both, you will be allowed to speak. If you do not, I believe we're going to have to stop that because we can't allow people from the outside as part of this discussion.
All right. May I speak on one of y'all's behalf? One or both? Thanks.
Now, whose behalf are you speaking on, sir?
Well, at the moment, I'm going to speak on behalf of Mr. Toddy.
Okay.
I'll reserve the right possibly to the mayor, depending upon the rest of the agenda for the evening.
Go ahead, sir.
The analogy that Mr. I don't know, it's Bissell made, I think it's close, but it's not quite. This is not, the analogy he made was somebody who is supposed to file a tax return but didn't. That's not what happened here. The analogy here would be, this man filed a tax return, he received a tax clearance letter, and then he went on with his business. And now you guys are coming back and saying that tax clearance letter was issued in error, and it's your fault for not questioning it.
So you have this in writing?
I'm making an analogy right now. What I have in writing is I have a plat that was signed by the proper authorities of your city and was recorded. It doesn't say that there's a city street. It says it's an easement. It's only a 4-lot subdivision with 2 lots fronting a main road. So it's a minor subdivision. It would be normal procedure for any planning commission of any city in Williamson County to provide a variance for something like this. So the fact that he didn't come back and question the planning commission is not out of order. In addition, your own subdivision regulations, Fairview City or Fairview zoning ordinance, does allow for a plat to be approved without a meeting.
Unless it's a major subdivision.
This isn't a major subdivision, this is a minor subdivision, if a subdivision at all.
Our codes department told us that it is a major subdivision. The same gentleman that he's speaking of gave him this permission to do this thing.
What?
It is a major subdivision.
Okay,
Our engineer says it is a major subdivision.
that doesn't change the fact that your own rules allow for a subdivision to be approved without a meeting.
It doesn't allow a major subdivision to be approved without a meeting.
There is no distinguishment between major or minor subdivisions in Rule 2-108.4. So you've got a developer, an experienced builder with a good reputation, who properly submitted the paperwork, was called and told, it's recorded, go to work.
You say properly, so you are saying on behalf of your client that he did pay the proper fees.
I don't know about that, and I don't think he knows about that. This was 2 years ago.
So we can't use the word proper.
What I'm saying is, if you look at this on its face, it was approved and it's ready for development. On its face, any person who is in the habit of looking at plats, and I look at a lot of them, they would look at this and say, it's okay, let's go to work. There's nothing on here that talks about fees. There's nothing on here that talks about whether a meeting was held. And like I said, under your own rules, it allows for a plat to be approved without a meeting. And like I say, the proper analogy is that a tax clearance letter has been issued. Fine, let's go to work.
Where's the tax clearance letter that you're referring to as far as him being given authority in writing to go ahead? Do you have that?
No, what I'm making is an analogy. Mr.
Well-
Bassell made an analogy that he didn't file a tax return when you're supposed to make tax returns.
I'm with you, except that the point I would beg to differ is that it was an oral communication.
Well, no, it's not an oral communication. He has a plat that's been signed off and recorded. So that effectively, as an analogy, is the same as getting a tax clearance letter. You're approved, you're cleared to go forward. So,
Is that the plat or the revised plat?
well, they were both signed off by the planning commission, or by some, I mean, you can't read the name, I don't know whose name it is, but it was signed by somebody with authority on behalf of the planning commission.
Can you read the names?
Well, you can't, I just said you can't read
So
the
you
signature.
you couldn't sit here tonight and tell us that that was signed on behalf of the city? You can just say that someone signed it?
It's signed by the secretary of the Fairview Planning Commission.
The secretary would be Miss Lisa Anderson. Is that what that name reads?
You can't read the name. I mean, it could be your name, I don't know. It's impossible to read. My point is, I just want to make sure that everybody understands, the people in this room understand, the TV cameras understand, that this man didn't do anything that he knew was wrong. And for 2 years, he's been building and no one's ever said that he did anything wrong. And I think he's right, that to penalize him for doing what he thought was right, this is not ignorance of the law. This is, we've approved your plat, go to work. Oh, 2 years later, you know what? We didn't approve it. We messed up. But that's not his fault. And he's willing to pay the expenses that it costs to go back and get things done right. But
Are you saying he is?
So okay, that's
That's
what we
already
wanted
said.
to hear.
he's paying for chaplain, but he's not agreeing to pay penalties.
But what he should have done in the first place.
He's agreeing to pay what he should have paid in the first place.
So the street will be completed as should have been done.
If they
Well-
require it, you are saying he will pay for it?
If the planning commission, in an unbiased, objective analysis, would require that, I believe that he would. However,
Well, he's standing right behind you. Ask him. Ask him. He's standing right there.
Well, but let me clarify that.
He's told me no.
And you just said he said yes.
And I'm not finished speaking.
Okay.
However,
Just about, go ahead.
a normal, objective planning and zoning commission would not require, at least 2 years ago, would not require this to be made a city road.
How
And that's
many
what you're
people make
asking
up
to
our
do.
planning commission?
I'm sorry?
How many people make up our planning commission?
I don't know that.
Then how do you know 2 years ago, a normal planning commission?
Because you can drive all over Williamson County and see the green signs for the streets that were, or blue signs rather, for streets that were approved under the old rules. And he's been building for a lot of years. He's used to the old rules. The rules changed literally right after this plat was approved. So for you to say that it needs to be done to current standards when this was a 2-year-old plat, or to say that he should have known better when he got somebody with the proper authority to sign it, that's not right. And the people need to understand, that's not right. This man did what a normal, responsible builder would do. And you're saying that he didn't and he should have known better. But I'm telling you, there was no way for him to know better. The people who are supposed to know better and sign it did so, and he went forward on their authority.
So you're saying with all certainty, as that plat shows, it should be signed by the secretary of the planning commission. You are going to tell us that the secretary of the planning commission signed that because Mr. Toddy himself has said that she did not.
I don't know who signed this. What I'm saying is, it's a plat that's signed by somebody who held themselves out to have the authority to sign it. And it's not his fault if it wasn't the right person, or if they didn't follow the rules, because he was told that they followed the rules. He was under the impression they followed the rules, and he had the paperwork that makes it appear that he followed the rules. That's called working under the color of authority. To the best of his knowledge, he had the authority to go forward and do the things that he did. He was issued permits. He's paid for certificates of occupancy. He's done all the normal things that a normal person does in this circumstance.
Except come back in front of the planning commission.
And there was no reason for him to believe that he needed to, under
After
your own
building all these
rules.
homes in this city and spending dozens of times in front of the planning commission, he all of a sudden didn't have to, or didn't realize he should have,
He,
or forgot that it should have came back up here again. For some reason, it was okay all of a sudden. I disagree with you. I'm not going to insult his intelligence.
If I could ask a question here, Mr. Hall, maybe you could help me on this. If we do issue the citations and Mr. Toddy wishes to contest the citations, is there not a process that goes through where he goes to the Board of Zoning Appeals or something to that effect? So, further, granted, I understand what you're saying, but you're not persuading me that as a long-term builder, that Mr. Toddy, it didn't cross his mind, hey, this process is not following the same process as before. I might ought to check on it. I don't believe that if I was his roofer and I told him something different than the last time I told him, he wouldn't ask me about it again. I don't believe that. And so I believe he would apply the same due diligence to every part of his business if he was going to do that. And that's what I'm saying here. So you and I will just have to agree to disagree. If I believe the citation should be issued, and if he wishes to appeal the fine and go through that process, then he certainly can do that, and you can make your arguments there.
Mrs. Carroll?
I have a question for Mr. Hall. Can you tell us or have somebody look up the information when the last time the subdivision regulations were updated? What year? Because I want to say it's been some time where I was on the board.
Yeah, it's not been in the last 2 years.
It's not in the two. But you think it was while I've been a commissioner?
I got a question. When was the last time the new subdivision regulations went into effect or enforced with any development in Fairview?
When was the last time?
What was the last subdivision approved that went under the new subdivision regulations? Which one was that?
What would be the newest one? Would it be Mitch Dottie's 4-lot subdivision? over at the corner of Fernvale Road and Hunting Camp Road? Would that probably be the last one? That's considered a major subdivision with the same 4 houses, and he came to the planning commission and, see, the thing is here, Mr. Toddy, if you had come to the planning commission, you would have signed a development agreement for the subdivision and posted a bond, but I guess you're saying that you didn't know the rules because you didn't sign the paperwork. Now, whether he didn't ask you to sign the paperwork, I don't.
Well, I didn't sign any paperwork because it never was presented to me.
I understand.
How much, I'm sorry.
Yes,
That's
go
right.
ahead.
How much would your wife have to do with your business? Does she have, like, would she drop off anything for you at City Hall? Has she ever ran errands? Is she an active part of the business, or can you kind of just give me?
She handles the real estate paperwork primarily. Other than that, she don't really keep up with what I do in the field.
The only thing it's clicking, but I'm trying to figure out as far as the planning commission. I don't know if it was my planning commission days or as a commissioner, but I remember in the last couple of years that we sat down and we reviewed the subdivision regulations and we approved them. So I'm just trying to figure out the time frame. So if somebody can look that up for me and let me know, because even if you didn't know, I'm trying to see, 2011, we were in office. So I was just trying to get a timeline.
Commissioner Carroll, maybe I can help you. I served on the planning commission from 2006 to 2008. Mr. Lavorne and I was the planning commission chairman, and Mr. Lavorne and I worked on the rewrite of the subdivision regulations.
Okay.
Okay? Now, they were not completed until after I became a became a city commissioner. But it was shortly after that. So I was trying to look through my notes here. I want to say that at the earliest, it would have been like 2008. At the latest, it would have been 2009.
Okay.
And you were probably on the planning commission, but I'm not sure you were a
That's what I'm
commissioner
trying to
yet.
figure out. Okay.
I believe they were passed before you and the mayor took office.
Okay.
Mr. Toddy, Mrs. Carroll just asked you a question. You said that the mayor does the real estate aspect of your business. Does that mean you do all the bookkeeping and paperwork, and you take in all the bills, you write all the checks and everything? So you would be responsible for?
That's correct.
Does the mayor have signature authority on your account, on your construction account?
Yes.
And I couldn't find anything in the corporation records that indicated that it's W.C. Toddy Construction, is that correct?
W.C. Toddy Building.
Building, I'm sorry. But I couldn't find anything under W.C. Toddy that indicated it was a corporation, that are you an LLC?
Sole proprietor.
Sole proprietor, okay. So you file tax returns together?
Yes.
Okay. Is the general way, and I guess I'm kind of using what little I know about this development y'all are starting out here on Horn Tavern, is the way the business kind of works. You mentioned the real estate part of it, is that Ms. Toddy will in her business, she will run across a piece of property either by listing it or by hearing about it or seeing somebody else's listing that might be something y'all are interested in, and then y'all will buy that property together, and then you will develop off of that. Is that generally the way it works, or are you out looking for property the same as she's out looking for property, or she's just not looking for property? How does that work? Because my understanding was that the
property on Horn Tavern kind of worked the way I described it, but that may not be
It works both ways. If she sees a piece of property, she lets me know, vice versa. And we take it from there, whether or not we're interested in it or not. She handles the real estate and I stay in the field. So I run my own business as far as what Commissioner Johnson was talking about. She handles the real estate, and that's about it.
But all the financial documents and everything, since everything seems to be in both of your names, any money that's borrowed against it, any deeds that have to be issued, she also signs those things because it's in
Yes.
both of your names.
Closing documents and that sorts of thing.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And Mr. Toddy, was any of this done through email, like any of your communication, or was it all verbal with Mr. Lavorne?
With me, everything was verbal. Now, I can't say past that. I talked to him from time to time about this, and I would ask him questions. It might be a week, it might be 2 weeks. He'd give me an answer, and we'd go from there.
But when I first asked Don Lavorne about this was about 2.5 months ago, almost 3 months ago now. And his response back to me was everything was okay until it was looked into again. Did you have any communication with Don Lavorne after the point that I called him?
I haven't talked to Don.
Okay.
So after the subdivision started and you started building, all communications were with John Bledsoe?
Well, I wouldn't say for absolute sure every word that was passed was between me and John Bledsoe. I'm sure somewhere along the line I probably did talk to Don, but I don't know what specifically it would have been. I know one time he told me, he said that we had to, put a fire hydrant out there. We talked about that, and of course, we done it, and, most of the conversation is actually between me and John over inspections.
But there's no documentation of approval to move forward.
Excuse me?
There's no documentation of approval to move forward with the subdivision.
Well, my plat was. It was platted at the county and recorded, and it was presented to me. That's my okay to start work. I guess if it wasn't proper for me to start work, they probably would have never sold me 4 building permits.
Is it common practice for your wife to sign the plat, or does she do it as a city representative?
She signs documents that I have to sign periodically from time to time. It's legal documents wherever we're at, whether it's at a closing table or a bank or whatever.
So she was owner of this property also for her to sign, or active in the business?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm just trying to put wrap my hands around the fact that, as far as what you're stating is, you went in, you asked Don what you needed to do, he reviewed the plans, and from that point on, no longer was it, he didn't come back and say, okay, you're going to need a fee for this, or we're not, he pretty much, you're saying, he said, nope, you don't need to go in front of the planning commission.
No, he didn't say, no, you don't need to go.
Okay.
It just didn't happen. I got the plat back signed, and he said it was going to be recorded and everything was good. I was under the understanding originally when I give it to him that it probably would be going because that's a typical process.
Yeah.
Why it didn't actually make it to the meeting, I could not tell you. I don't know.
Yeah, that's really scary to me to think of the process, and it did not, and no one could, no one caught this, from our part, and if Don's taken blame, as he did in the last meeting, it just, without having him here to answer the questions, I don't know.
But you
It's
just
hard
said,
to-
you just said it was strange to you that you didn't have to. Is that right?
It did pass my mind of how it actually was passed, because that wasn't normal. But I rolled on because it was signed and it was recorded, and there wasn't nothing really telling me that I couldn't.
Mr. McCann, do you have both plats with you here this evening?
Well, I do. I've got, these little shrunken copies. You can't read much.
You say you cannot read the Secretary of the Planning Commission's signature.
I'll
Are
let you
all,
look at it. It's
are all
illegible.
other signatures on that document recognizable?
Really, almost none of them are recognizable. If it was blown up full size, it might be more recognizable, but
We have that elbow that you can show. It'll blow it up and put it on the screen. If you want to give that to, if somebody will take that back there. Don may be the only one that knew how to use it, I'm not sure. We'll see, hang on, I think we can.
It may have to be done up here.
No, you should be able to do it back there. It's over here, projected back where it is.
Vice Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I know, I talked with Matt Beata, and I know that Matt, that's Matt's signature on there
Okay.
as the second secretary. And he says that he was contacted by Don and told to come by and sign it. So I'm not sure where you're going with this, but it's not going to be Lisa's signature for sure, because Matt already says it's his.
Did Matt give any indication of, because typically Lisa would have signed it, did he give any indication on why he was called to sign it?
He said that he's only contacted as second secretary when Lisa is not available. And he said it's rare, and that he typically just comes by and Sharon Hall has it ready for him with it starred as to where he's supposed to sign, and he just signs it on behalf of the planning commission.
Well, I would like to know if he thought it was odd. He is a builder, if he reviewed it or if he was under the impression it went through the planning commission.
Well, I can only tell you what he told me, and that was that he did not remember it going through the planning commission, but he said he really wasn't paying that much attention to it. So because I think he does miss some of the planning commission meetings, I think he didn't feel confident to say one way or the other.
Mr. Vice Mayor,
Yes,
while
sir.
we're waiting to get that up, may I say something?
Yes, sir.
I haven't heard any indication that anyone has alleged or thinks that this is a forgery. I mean,
Yeah.
apparently it is a valid document. And my concern is that if it is a valid document, I don't believe there's anybody can show you, this may not make me very popular, but it's very true, can show me any case law that says that if I've got a government document, if I don't have some actual knowledge that would prompt me to think this is an invalid document or a forged document or an illegally procured document, there's no case law that says that I, as an individual, have to look behind that government document to see that it's valid.
Just for the record, Larry, I believe it happened just like Mr. Toddy said it happened. I just don't believe that relieves him of the responsibility to follow the law. That somebody told him that.
I don't have any doubt about that, but I've been hearing this stuff about
I want both of them in the screen.
whose signature is
I
invalid.
just want to be clear where I am on it.
Yeah.
I'm not disputing Mr. Toddy's story. I believe that's what happened. He doesn't think he should be held accountable. I think he ought to be held accountable.
Well, that's probably to be held at another time.
At another time. But that's not, I don't dispute what he says. I've come to the conclusion that that's probably what happened. Don told him it was okay, and he built houses.
And I just wanted to get that in the record for everybody to consider it, that if that is the case, if I have no reason to believe that a document I get from the government is invalid, I have no requirement, no legal requirement to look behind that document. I get a birth certificate, I don't have to look behind it. I get a death certificate, I send it off to the life insurance company, and unless there's something to make them think that that person is not actually deceased and this document is invalid, you can proceed on the document. And that's the only point I wanted to make.
Can we get the screen turned back on? Mr. McCann, could you put it on there where both signatures, the signature side down the left-hand side, both of them can be seen on the screen at the same time? Can you overlap them?
The initial plat was filed on 10/14, the second one was filed in December, and the second one widened the easement from 20 feet to 30 feet.
Could you tell us where the Planning Commission approved that variance?
Well, it's signed by someone
Mr. Beata, we're gonna,
who's holding themselves out to have authority on behalf of the Planning Commission.
okay?
And I think if you read the form, it says that they certify that this plat has been approved.
Okay. What are all the X's? Can you explain what the X's are in your dealings in this, in your
The
profession?
X's are where those particular signature blocks have been deemed to not apply for this particular case.
Okay,
These are for water and sewer, and the water and sewer on this is from Dixon County. And so my belief would be that Fairview Planning did not deem it necessary to have that signed off by someone from another department from another county.
okay, so Dixon Water didn't sign either plat?
Right.
Water Authority of Dixon County signed neither plat?
And I'm not saying that they should have.
Okay. So we have above Beata's signature on both plats. We do have some signatures in one box. The same box on the other document, there are no signatures. Can you explain that?
Yeah, because the second plat was recorded or was done solely to just expand or widen the easement. So,
What happens to the first plat at that point?
well, it's modified.
Does it
Modified
go away,
easement.
or does the second plat replace it?
Well, sometimes it replaces it, sometimes it's just an amendment to it.
Have you signed either of those documents at any time?
Not these. I don't normally sign on the plat. It always has to be signed by the owners. It always has to be approved by the Planning Commission. And then the other signature blocks are only signed when they are required.
The plat on the right, is it not dated?
Plat on the right. It is
Is it dated by the two property owners?
No.
Looking at those signatures of the two property owners, would you say those were signed by exactly the same person? They look awfully different on the two separate documents.
There's no way of knowing. I'm not a handwriting expert, and I don't know that They're the right signatures or not.
Does anyone else have any questions for Mr. McCann or for Mr. Toddy? We have a motion on the floor. We have a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. We will now move on to the second part of the meeting here, and it is to discuss and/or take action on the level of the mayor's and,
The B, as I discussed with you earlier.
okay?
I discussed with Vice Mayor earlier that he would turn B over to me. B is discussion and/or take action on level of mayor's involvement in errors and omissions in the Williamsport Estate subdivision approval and building process. Guess we'll have questions. We'll start with you, Commissioner Sutton.
I'm still reading. If you start down there, it'd be all right. Appreciate it.
Commissioner, Vice Mayor Johnson?
At any point during, you say you do have involvement in the business, but you don't have involvement in the business. Could you differentiate how you do and how you don't?
I guess the best way to say is if he needs errands run, I may run them,
Okay?
but I don't involve myself in his business as far as the process or the bill paying.
And you do not sign checks?
On occasion, if he's directed, yes.
Okay. That's all I have right now.
Commissioner Sutton?
Do you have anything to do with the accounting process whatsoever?
Accounting process. If he's asked to write a check, I might, but as far as his books, no, sir.
So you don't review them at the end of the year before accounting process, before taxes or anything like that?
No, he brings his box to the CPA and they do his taxes.
Then you just sign off on them? I'll go ahead and ask another question on it. There again, there's not a question of intelligence here or indicated either way. You've been on the planning commission, you were on the planning commission when this was done, correct?
When the subdivision was built?
Yes.
I've been on the planning commission since November of 11, yes, sir.
And you recused yourself each and every time, which was several times.
Anything that has anything to do with interest, I will, yes, sir.
And you're fully aware of the rules and regulations and requirements for the planning commission.
I would not say fully aware, no, sir. It's a book about this big that I study as needed and as asked.
Okay. But you had access to all the rules and regulations.
I had the
You had the
planning
book,
commission
okay.
book, yes, sir.
The big book on it. So by recusing yourself each one of those times and never seeing it come back to the planning commission, did you not have a question about that?
I did never question whether his subdivision was or was not in the right or wrong, but I've never been asked a question about if it was or it wasn't.
Do you think it was in the right or wrong?
I don't know if he was following along with what Don LaVorne said. He was acting under what they asked for him to do. I do know that he did everything the city asked him to do.
Let me ask you another question, Mayor.
Let's, go ahead. Did you finish your question?
Yes, I'm done.
Okay, go ahead, finish, sorry.
Your husband has spoke that he doesn't necessarily think that he needs to fix the problems. The attorney thinks that he probably would if the planning commission was unbiased. Do you think it's a fair thing to do if the planning commission reviewed it and said, you should do this, you don't have to do that? Do you think that y'all should make it right?
I think my answer would be presumptuous, not knowing exactly what the planning commission would require and exactly how that could or could not be addressed. So I think that would be premature, and it would never be anything that I would be discussing or anything I would make decision on. That would be between the developer and his knowledge and the planning commission and the engineer.
All right. Well, then a follow-up question to that would be, if your company decided they were not going to do it, but the planning commission said this is what has to be done, do you think the burden should be passed on to the Fairview taxpayers to pave the city street? If your company was unwilling to do it, do you think it would be fair for the taxpayers to have to bring it up to standard?
I understand your question, and I believe that the information of it being an easement is a very big subject that needs to be discussed.
I understand your answer, but you didn't answer the question. I'm just saying, if the planning commission may be completely fine with it being an easement. If the planning commission says, no, it's a major subdivision, it is a city street, it needs to be built to certain standards, and you say, my company's not going to do it, my husband's company's not going to do it, is it fair for the Fairview taxpayers to have to pay for it?
And I understand your question, but I think it's presumptuous to have a question, much less a full set answer that would be said, yes, anything that's said, because I believe it needs to be discussed by the proper people.
Okay.
Mayor, if I could word the question in a little different way, because I don't think it's presumptuous at all. I think it's the core issue that we have to decide as it pertains to serving with you. And that is, if the Fairview Planning Commission tells W.C. Toddy Builders, build the road, where do you stand? Are you going to, as mayor of this city, stand with build the road? Or are you going to say, as a sole proprietor, no, I'm standing with W.C. Toddy, my husband, and we're not building the road?
Mr. McCann, would you speak?
Well, I think that the questions are presuming, number one, that she hasn't recused herself, which she did, so she's not a part of the decision that's being
She
made.
did not recuse herself from this conversation.
No, but when the plat was approved or wasn't approved or voted on or not voted on, she was recused.
I'm
so
simply
she had no
asking her a
responsibility.
question, is she going to follow her oath of office, or is she going to side with her husband?
Well, the construction company is her husband, it's not her. She's not a part of the construction company.
Yes, she is. She's a sole proprietorship. She has a financial interest in that company because they file a tax return together, they share joint bank accounts, they live in the same residence, they own the property together.
Sir, as an IRS agent, you should know that a Schedule C applies to scheduled
parties
income of one party.
No, not under the law. It is a joint, non-severable liability.
And there's an
If you
innocent
file a tax
spousal
return
rule.
together, both people are responsible for the income and/or the taxes generated from that.
Can you
She has a
define-
financial interest in that. She said she signed checks. That's not the point here.
Well, I
The
think the
tail we're
question-
chasing is very simple. You took an oath of office that you would support and uphold the laws of the city of Fairview. Now, if the laws of the city of Fairview are determined that that company owes either money or owes something, where are you going to stand? That's what I need to know, because that's the central question to me. I get everything that's happened. I don't disbelieve anything that I've been told. Where I want to know is, what is my mayor? Because my mayor is quoted as saying some things in the paper that would make me believe that, in retrospect, looking at this, that part of her value system is that if it looks bad, then you extricate yourself from that, and you haven't done that. This did occur. This subdivision was built. These plats were filed. Everything did occur. So the part I'm trying to get my hands around, because it's a very important decision that has to be made, is where is your integrity in all of this? Yes, maybe you're not on a day-to-day actively involved in that business, but I disagree with this gentleman that you have a financial interest in that business. And you are involved in it because you signed. So if it boils down to the city or you, where do you come down? That's what I want to know.
That's my only question.
I feel like you're asking me to answer a question that hadn't been decided yet. That's my opinion, and I feel very uncomfortable saying whatever it is when we have to discuss what has happened, why it has happened, what can be done, and what needs to be done to do as right in where we sit right now in a finished, well, practically finished subdivision.
Mayor, while you were on the planning commission, have you ever given variances to subdivisions? Have you seen it happen? Not you personally, just while you've sat on the board. Have subdivisions come in front of the planning commission where you would give some kind of variance to the builders?
I would have to look at records of the minutes of when those were presented, but that's the proper procedure as we sit on the board to look at things, yes?
And then sometimes determine what we're going to require them to do, and if we want to give a variance, the planning commissioner, as the planning commission, we would vote that in, right?
The planning commission has that authority, yes.
So y'all could have gone and got a variance if you thought you needed to. Like, it would have been the process. If you thought you needed to widen the road or make changes, you could have done that. You could have gone in front of the planning commission and requested variances.
You're speaking about properties that I've been involved in, or are you
Well,
speaking
no,
about
I'm just saying you
as a-
have that knowledge that builders can do that.
when told by the codes director or the codes department as needed, yes.
Okay.
Any other questions?
So you're not going to answer the question on what,
Did answer the question, sir.
no, officially you didn't answer the question, but that's fine if that's the answer.
To the best of my
if that's the
knowledge, I
answer
answered
you
the
choose to
question you're
give, that
asking.
you don't want to tell the public how you
To the
will
best of my
represent.
knowledge, I answered the question, yes, sir.
Okay.
Did Mr. Lavorne ever call you when Commissioner Sutton started questioning the subdivision, and maybe when he realized that there might be something wrong?
I didn't know that there was anything wrong.
So you've never gotten a call from Mr. Lavorne addressing, like when
No
the
one's
commissioner?
no one's ever said there's a problem with the subdivision and brought that to my attention, no.
So the first you heard about it was?
The special meeting being
meeting
called on the
in-
December 17th. Other questions? What are the wishes of the board?
I have a motion. Mayor, you're probably not going to believe me when I tell you that it's not with any pleasure that I make this motion. This is amongst the hardest thing that I think I've ever had to do sitting in this office. But I think we have a responsibility to take this to the next level, which is a formal hearing where a decision is rendered as to whether or not you did something that was right or wrong. I therefore make a motion that the city attorney, from the direction of the city manager, prepare a formal notice of charges that you did willfully participate in the building of a subdivision, and it was not built in accordance with the City of Fairview regulations and those constituting misdemeanors under Tennessee law. And the city attorney will have to provide us with the necessary wording for that, once that is prepared, that it be served on you, and that we call a special meeting for next Thursday at 5:30 p.m., in which time that we will conduct a formal hearing and then make a final decision as to whether or not there's any culpability here on your part.
Second.
In discussion, I will note that I will not be available that particular day.
Okay, how about the
Choose another
23rd?
date. I'll be available after the
At 6:30,
After the 25th.
the following.
After the 25th.
I'm sorry.
After the 25th.
Then I make the motion that we do it on the 30th, the night of the town hall, instead of the town hall, 7 o'clock.
I would like to amend that motion that we have an independent investigation done prior to this meeting or hearing.
I'll second that for discussion.
Discussion?
I just don't know that there's enough information here. I mean, I would like an outside person to come in and give a legal opinion on the whole situation.
But can I ask a question? Larry, under this right here, as a formal meeting that we're discussing, could subpoenas be issued for that?
The board would have authority to issue subpoenas if they
Okay.
deem it necessary.
I just want to make sure that, and at what point do we need to do that?
Well, you'd have to get them to them in time, get them out in time to be served, and get them back. If you're gonna have and I'm not opposed to a outside investigation, but if you're gonna do that, you need to set your meeting after you get that report back, because I don't know how quickly you get that back. It might be 2 weeks, it might be 10 days, it might be 3 weeks.
Well, I just,
The-
okay, go, I'm sorry.
The important thing being that the investigation be done properly rather than, just having something quick. You want something that's accurate.
Yeah, I just believe due process should occur. We need, professional outside agency to come in before we determine in a hearing whether or not the mayor.
I don't have a problem with that at all, leaving the city manager to choose someone to come in from the outside.
I think you would have to get the minutes from tonight's meeting, the minutes from the meeting with Mr. Lavorne, and have those available for the outside investigator.
As far as, do you have any opinions on the process, or if you think this is a necessary process?
Well, if you're going to initiate the process, I think it's necessary that you have the investigation. The problem is that you're going to have is I understand that you're talking about two different hearings. You're talking about a hearing to determine if you want to proceed on further, and the other process is that under the charter for fitness for office, you have a hearing on that, and any findings on that is not mistakes. It's not, even if it's a mistake, inadvertently I violated a statute or I violated an ordinance, it is a situation, the only way you can remove an elected official from office, and that, I have not heard anybody say that, but that's the reason for having the hearing, to see if, when you say go forward, people are elected to office, and courts are very, very slow to remove someone from office whom the people have elected, as they should be. The process involves, it has to be something that is sufficient to be a crime, and not just a misdemeanor type crime. It has to be something that you could be indicted for under the, today or under the old common law. And it can't be something that I did this just as inadvertence. I got a traffic citation, I was speeding down the road. Yes, that's an offense that I could be indicted for, but it's not going to rise to an offense that I could be removed from office for. There is one other thing that the board could do after it has this hearing. You may have to, may not have any choice, depending on what the result of the hearing is. You may have to report this to the State of Tennessee Comptroller's Office. And they can appoint whomever they want to do an investigation, TBI, anybody they want to appoint. Or they can take the information that this board has assembled, the independent investigation, et cetera, look at it and say, there's no point in going forward. This board itself may do that. They look at the results of the independent investigation and say, you know, this has been thoroughly investigated by an independent firm that has no connection with the city, and this is no reflection on any city official, any city staff member, myself, or anyone else connected with the city. Anytime you get into this type of situation, you desperately need someone who is not connected with the city to conduct that investigation. Number one, it sets up a situation where this person they don't work here, they don't work with any of the people here, they don't work with any of the staff here. They come in, they take the facts, they do their investigation, and then they're gone. It has instant credibility, as it should. They're being paid to do a job. They aren't being paid to find a result. It's not differential equations where you get the answer and work back to the question. You're given a set of circumstances and say, go investigate this, talk to whomever you need to talk to, bring me a written report with recommendations supported by evidence. That's the way it should be. That's whom the person that I'm sure the city manager will be getting will be that type of an individual. But I would suggest to the board that if you want to adopt that, and I do think that's the smart way to go if you're going to go a route on this, is to get that independent investigation and then set your meeting, because you don't want the meeting driven by the report. You want, when the report's finished, to be able to proceed to your meeting, have a logical conclusion to this issue, because if there's not anything out there to be garnered, and I'm not making aspersions either way, but if there's not anything out there to be garnered, you want this thing over with, because it hurts the city, it hurts the function of this board, it hurts the function of people trying to deal with the public, and if it's baseless, then get it over with. If it is not baseless, then go do what you got to do. But at any rate, you can't win anything by dragging this on. That's not fair to the person that you're investigating. It's not fair to you as board members. It's not fair to the staff. It has to deal with the public, and it's not fair to the public. That's more than I've talked in the last 3 days, because I couldn't talk that much.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
My goal is just to get all the answers to all the questions that we're asking, them not be averted, and have the opportunity for having the codes department here under oath to be able to answer the questions that we need to be asked, so they can be duly documented. So I agree with the amendment.
Well, and is it your suggestion to go ahead and proceed with the hearing and then determine in the investigation? I mean, I know you said we would want to do the...
No, ma'am. My suggestion would be get your independent investigation first.
Okay.
Because then you've got a hearing, and you want to have that investigation report back, have a chance for it to be disseminated to you, be able to read it, digest it, and then have your hearing.
Okay.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of the amended motion?
Aye.
I will not vote. All those in favor of the,
Not gonna take nays?
all those in favor of the all those in favor of the amended motion?
Aye. We already voted on that.
I know,
Oh, yay.
Are you doing the amended? Already
Amended
said
motion, you
aye.
did. Any opposed?
Nay.
The original motion, does it still stand, or did that negate it? You have 3 for the amended for the
That would ne-
investigation.
I think that would negate the
I
original
think so
motion.
too. That's why I asked.
The amended motion would actually, in this instance, so close to take the place of the first one, you won't need to vote on the original motion.
Okay.
Hire somebody. We
Mayor, if I could.
We won't know when to set the meeting for,
One more thing.
that we're gonna need a meeting.
City Manager, can you get to us back as quickly as possible to let us know that you have assigned someone to do this? And as rough as possible, get a time frame so we set another meeting for it.
Need a motion for adjournment.
Moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Good evening.